So, Tarantino is one of the most popular directors working all time. Everyone seems to have an opinion on him. Either you really like his movies or you hate them. You can hate them because of the over-the-top action, or you dislike them because you think they're dude bro movies. I hate that term, by the way.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?
I don't know. Personally, I like most of his works. I think he's great at what he does. And I think that like just no one can make a movie like he does. Before we get into the rankings, I want to talk about his earlier works. Starting with his first movie, My Best Friend's Birthday from 1987. It was unfortunately destroyed in a fire, so all that's left is like a 30-minute short that's pretty much a unfollowable story. But there's some small stuff to appreciate looking at his first work, like how he got better as a director or how his style of dialogue like carries forth into his other movies, because this movie has that like Tarantino style of dialogue, that relatability, just a bunch of people talking about movies, music, TV, just that has that feel of your bros talking about stuff or just shooting the shit. I don't know, I just love his natural dialogue, and it's cool to see that in his first movie and how it carries forth in all those other works. He also wrote a bunch of movies like True Romance, which is very similar to My Best Friend's Birthday, with the main character having this fascination for Elvis. And the character is very similar to one in My Best Friend's Birthday. It's cool to see that something came out of this destroyed movie. I don't know how similar they are or if they're just like two completely different movies, but it's cool to see that like little nod to his old work. Also with True Romance, I find Brad Pitt's character to be so funny. It's one of my favorite performances by him. He just plays the stoner, and I don't know why. It's just so funny to me.
You condescend me, man. I'll fucking kill you, man.
Other movies he wrote were Natural Born Killers, The Rock. He apparently worked on rewrites on this movie called Crimson Tide, and he also wrote From Dusk Till Dawn. Amongst these, I've only ever seen Natural Born Killers, which I found kind of boring. I mean, I would love to see how this movie would be if Tarantino directed it, but with Oliver Stone directing it, I just think it's just too, I don't know, it just doesn't have, it's too mainstream for me. That sounds so pretentious of me, but like, I don't know, it's too like big budget Hollywood movie to me. I don't know. It doesn't have that feel to me. So going to my rankings from worst to best, here is my ranking of all Tarantino's movies. So this movie is almost universally agreed to be his worst movie. I think there's a lot to enjoy about this movie, and if you do think it's one of his best, I can see why. If you really get into this movie, the dialogue, just like all of his other works, is great. It was a part of this double feature with Planet Terror as this homage to old double features back in the day. But my main problem with this movie is its two main acts. The movie flows well, has a good pacing in the first act, and then the transition between the first one to the second one just halts this movie to a complete stop for me and just like kills the vibe. You get time to know these characters, follow these characters, and then bye-bye, new characters for you to follow, and there's no real overarching plot, or there's no real plot at all in this movie. It's just friends talking leading up to this action scene. I don't know. Maybe if I liked action more, I'd like this movie, but I don't really like action movies or racing movies in general, or just anything that involves like cars mostly. I don't know. I wish I liked it. I just don't. And I don't know. I wish this movie was good, because if this movie is good, it'd be cool to see how different his movies would be, because this is definitely the most experimental movies ever done. And if this movie was critically acclaimed, or if this movie is very popular, maybe his like later works would be completely different than what they were. I mean, it'd be cool to see like a different universe where Death Proof was a success.
I am gonna kill Bill.
Okay, so it's weird talking about this one without talking about the first one. First being, in reality, these movies are pretty much just one big movie, and I like to think that they are just one movie, but in all actuality, these are two different movies. This one is definitely worse than the first one. Everything that made the first one good is just missing in this one. And just like Death Proof, whenever it gets to the last act, I think this movie just hits the brakes, and it ruins like the flow and the pacing for me. I don't know. Let's move on. So this is definitely the outlier in his works, for my opinion. That, I mean, most of his works, he changes his style a little bit or covers something new between each one. But this one is very similar to Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction for me. And maybe I would like it more if I didn't know if it was a Tarantino movie. But this one, I just have like this disconnection. I don't know. This one just doesn't work for me for some reason. I wish I liked it. There's stuff in it that I really enjoy, like the music. And I absolutely love De Niro's character in this. Even though he's just like this small character that's barely ever shown. I just really enjoy his character and I find his character just so funny to me. But this movie just doesn't work with me for some reason. I wish it did. I don't know why.
Masochistic.
Bill, it's your baby.
Here we go. Kill Bill Volume 1. This is the first Tarantino movie I ever knew about. I mean, I didn't know it was one of his movies, but my stepdad is named Bill, and I remember the name of this movie being funny because, you know, his name's Bill. I don't think I ever watched it, but I always noticed the title, and I remember saying it as a kid. Despite me not liking action, I find this movie somewhat enjoyable. I don't think much about the action, but this being mainly an action-heavy movie, I have to mention it. I think the character of has a good story. This was my first revenge movie where a girl gets raped and then she kills her raper. In this, obviously, she doesn't get raped, but you can see the connection between them, his homage to those style of movies. I think the visuals in this movie are absolutely beautiful. The music in this is kind of ruined by being overused in pop culture and in YouTube videos and like Vines. I can't really particularly pick out one thing that ruined it. But I just think the music in it is just so overused that it kind of ruins it a little bit for me, and I don't appreciate it as much. I think I would appreciate it more if it wasn't used so much, which sucks. This one isn't bad, it just doesn't feel like a movie. It feels more like a stage play to me. Maybe that's because of the very few sets being in this, because it mostly takes place in one room, and the movie is very heavily focused on the dialogue. I mean, obviously it is a movie, but it has this different feel that isn't bad. It gives it a very unique experience. And I do think it's a good movie. It's two bounty hunters, a driver, a hangman, a writer, and a hotel worker stuck in its room with a criminal with a bounty on her head. And someone is secretly working with the criminal to escape during this huge blizzard. It has this very Clue-like feel, which I really liked. But it's one of Tarantino's works I find very hard to revisit, one because of this feel, and two being this movie is very long. And also have to mention Ennio Morricone worked on the score. He's an absolute legend. I love his scores for the Sergio Leone spaghetti western movies back in the day, and I love and adore the music in this. Ennio's just, you know, he's a great guy. He's a good guy.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
In my mind, I don't remember if I watched this one first or Pulp Fiction, but this was definitely one of my first Tarantino movies I actually watched. And I watched this before I really got into movies or thought about them more critically. I still really enjoy this movie. It's a very simple Nazi bad let's kill Hitler story. It's a very easy story to get into because of that, and this one definitely separates itself from other World War II movies, being that it's more focused on this like theater owner and a group of bastards that hunt down Nazis instead of fighting them in the battlefield. I think just like The Hateful Eight, this one I struggle to rewatch, or I just have no desire to revisit it. Not because I think it's bad, but I don't know, I just never have a reason to rewatch it. It is good. Check it out if you haven't. I mean, I sound like I'm being overly negative, but I think it's a good movie. 9 out of 10, man.
I think this just might be my masterpiece.
I recently covered this one on my podcast, so if you want a more in-depth review of this one, check it out, links in the description. This is his debut movie, which is insane because the dialogue, the music, the story, all of it is so great. One of the easier ones to rewatch, and it's a great time. I don't think it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I don't necessarily love it, but I think it's a very good movie that I would highly recommend to anyone to try out. the most recent Tarantino, and it's so good. The first time I watched it, I really had mixed feelings about it, but after the second viewing, I truly love this movie. I think it's a great time. I just get lost in this film. I get lost into the setting of the late 60s California. The first time I watched this, it might have been worse because I was more focused and anticipating the Sharon Tate murder, but the second time I just could sit back and be more chill and enjoy more aspects of the movie. It's so good. One of the best movies released in 2019. There's a lot of talk / rumors that Tarantino is going to make one more movie and then retire, but honestly, I wish this one was his last. It'd be a perfect ending to his career because one, in my opinion, it's a great movie, and two, it has a little bit of all of his movies. You get a little taste of all of them. You can find a ton of his works in this, and it's just a great last movie, in my opinion. I just love this movie. If you somehow have never seen a Tarantino movie, I think this is the one to start off with, in my opinion. And if you like this one, I think you'd like most of his works.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
This is the one, man. An absolute masterpiece. This is my introduction to this movie. Was me and my friends would play Xbox back in the day, and in middle school we discovered soundboards, and we absolutely loved the Samuel L. Jackson one. We thought it was so funny, and a lot of those lines were obviously from this movie. So that led to me and my friends watching this movie, and we watched it tons of times. It's definitely one I feel nostalgic for. I really love this movie. I mean, what is there to say about this movie that hasn't been said before? I hate when people use that excuse to avoid talking about a movie, but so here's my tip. I love the music in this. I've said that a lot in this video, but I think Tarantino is so good at picking the right music for his movies. I love most of his soundtracks, or all of them. The story was my first non-linear story I've ever seen. I never knew you could tell a story like that, and it gives you reasons to rewatch this over and over and over again. As I said recently, I don't like action, but Samuel Jackson's speeches before the action just gets me. It just gets me. I love it. I think this is a true masterpiece that anyone that hasn't seen it somehow must watch it as soon as possible. It's one of the best movies ever made. I don't think this one's better than Pulp Fiction. I think it's hard to rank these two, but this one's definitely my favorite. I love the music, as I said hundreds of times in this video. This one just has the most satisfying story to me. Just like Inglourious Basterds, the story is so easy to get into. From the start, it's just Slave trying to free his wife, and it's like a fairy tale where the prince saves his princess, but it's set in this western atmosphere. This movie is so good. This movie's the most badass movie I've ever seen, and I absolutely love Jamie Foxx's performance as Django. This movie's just good. I had to mention it, but I think it sounds bad coming from a cisgendered straight white male, but the KKK scene in this is just so funny, and one of the funniest scenes in any movie all time. I find it so hilarious every time I watch it. Just these dudes fumbling and arguing over these masks because they can't see out the eye holes. I don't know, it's so funny and it's so great every time. It's a little treat of Jonah Hill every time I watch this movie.
If you don't wear them as you ride up, that just defeats the purpose.
Well, I can't see in this fucking thing. I can't breathe in this fucking thing, and I can't ride in this fucking thing.
Well, fuck all y'all, I'm going home.
This movie is great. It's the easiest one to rewatch, and the film just flows so well. The pacing is just so good. I don't know. This is me mainly just saying I like Tarantino movies, which I do, which isn't new or a bold take or anything. But yeah, that's my rankings of the Tarantino movies. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm watching, check out my Letterboxd or check out my podcast. Both links in the description. Yeah, check it out. See ya.